give us a quick word about who you are, and then away you go.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's lovely to be here. My name is Robin, and so I've been doing children's and family ministry up in the northwest of England for the last 20 plus years. Bit of a stint in London before that. Also, about to finish a PhD in children's ministry and do a bit of lecturing around the place. But I think we're here to talk about, what we learned from doing a little podcast together called Everyday Dadding. And my co-host is Ben. So say a little bit about yourself, Ben.
Yes, on the podcast. So Robin is the brains of the podcast. I'm the eye candy, which is obviously ideal for an audio-based medium. Exactly. What am I doing? I am a church pastor. We planted a church in September in a small town called Droitwich Spa, which is near Worcester. Before that, I was involved full-time running youth ministry at a place called Gaines Manor as a director of ministry, hosting kids camps and summer camps and weekends away for church youth groups and kids groups and all that kind of stuff. Before that, I was a high school teacher, so I've always been involved in sort of teenagery kind of stuff. And yeah, now serving full-time at our little church plant in Droitwich.
And I think what happened over the years, so in my ministry here, I noticed quite quickly that the dads needed a little bit of help in engaging with their kids. So there's some research by a guy called Vern Bengston who researched across monotheistic faiths to see how faith was passed down from generation to generation. And one of the key findings was that a warm relationship with the father of the household is one of the key factors in passing on the faith. Therefore, encouraging our dads to take an interest in the spiritual walk of their children is not just biblical. It's, there's sociological evidence to its importance. And so I noticed around me there were a number of dads who were lovely dads, but they weren't particularly on it in terms of taking the initiative with particularly their boys, actually. And often that meant the boys got out of control a little bit, and the dads just needed a bit of a helping hand. So I had a dads and lads weekend down at the Gaines Centre when Ben was there, and we spent the weekend doing kind of boy stuff, really. Now, some boys don't do that, and that's great, but building fire and chopping trees and all that kind of stuff that a lot of guys do enjoy. But the highlight really was having a room full of men and their boys singing together. But also Ben would do a talk, which was all right, and then there'd be he'd give us a series of quite open questions off the back of the talk, and told the dads, go and chat about these with your kids. And watching these dads just begin to open those conversations and talk and see that they could do it was a really beneficial, helpful thing for us to do. And I found that really, really helpful. Partly because there's a guy called Timothy Paul Jones who talks about family ministry. If you've not come across him, it's worth digging out his stuff. He's a Southern Baptist from the States. He's written a book. It's worth checking out his family ministry field guide. It's good at just giving some direction in terms of family ministry. And he talks about how parents, if you ask parents who are the primary disciplers of their children, I mean, this is United States research, he would say kind of 95% of them would say it's the parents. But then if you say, well, how many of you actually do Bible studies, pray with your kids, take the lead in family worship, is what he calls it, it would be down to about 20-something%, if even that. Therefore, the issue is not that dads don't know that they're meant to do it, it's that they don't have confidence doing it. And so what we wanted to do was simply put them in a situation with the tools where, oh, look, okay, you can do this. And so this led to a kind of just a desire to resource dads in any way we could. So we thought, how do we do that? We could do some dads and lads devotionals, which would do the same kind of thing. And that's still kind of in our minds a little bit. I don't know where that'll go. Maybe you could give us your thoughts on the usefulness of that. But actually, lockdown gave us the opportunity just to just a chat as dads, and hopefully produce something which might be helpful to resourcing dads. It's basically 20 minutes of us airing our failings as dads online. That's basically that's the bottom line of it. It's like, where have we gone wrong? And there's some lovely moments where we start recording based on a question, and halfway through we realize what we should be doing as dads. Penny drops and we go, oh, okay. So, have a listen and listen out for those. So we just want to share with you kind of 5 lessons that we've learned as we've done this, and hopefully that might be useful for you in your men's ministry, in your church, dad's ministry in your church, or even just personally for you as dads. So Ben, do you want to say any more on that?
Yeah, I think it's just worth adding that we ummed and ahed quite a lot, didn't we, before we actually started recording and putting stuff out there, in a kind of, well, we don't really know what we're talking about. We're not experts. Our only qualification is that we happen to be dads who are Christians. And I guess we were quite, that we did have a concern, I guess, at the beginning, that we didn't want to come across as, okay, here we go, we're going to tell you exactly how to do everything because we have all the answers. And if you listen to any of the episodes, that's patently obvious. I hope what we wanted to do is just go, okay, well, we're stuck in lockdown. We'll have conversations, and I think Robin would agree, hopefully. We've enjoyed doing it. It's been helpful for us just to talk about stuff. And if it begins a conversation with other folk, if it helps other people just to kind of think through some issues, have a think about what the questions are, start a conversation with our dads, then that's what we're aiming to do. We're not, I think, as we often say, don't come to us for the answers. We'll just give you more questions. But whilst we've been doing it, 5 things that we've learnt. Firstly, I think we've realised that dadding really is a kind of a variable sport, in a sense. There is no structure where you can say, if as a father you do this with your children, the end result will be this. It's not, you can't have a kind of systemized approach to parenting. You can't just have it's not an equation. It's not, if you do A, B, C, then D will result. And so what we want to try and do is help people to think through, well, how do my kids, my context, fit with kind of larger principles. The big thing, I think maybe less so in Robin's context, but where I am, we're particularly middle class kind of environment. And one of the problems I think I see with dads is that actually there's got to be a kind of a mindset shift in terms of what is the goal for their kids. And for many of them, actually, that they might be able to kind of say, well, yeah, it's the Deuteronomy stuff. It's the Deuteronomy 6. It's we want to pass on all the lessons of the Lord so that they love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. That's our job. But actually, in reality, in life, the goal for their kids is to get good exam results, play a musical instrument, make the sports team, be heterosexual, marry well, get a good job, have a nice house, and just kind of fulfill the middle class dream. And that's actually how life is organized. And it's a trap that's easy to fall into because those things in and of themselves aren't bad. But it's just kind of resetting. No, actually, what is the best thing for your child is that they know and love the Lord Jesus. End of. There is no better option. And actually, that does change how you do things in terms of how much time you commit to stuff, how important you see church, and all those kind of things. But what we've realised is that every kid is different. Even if you are a father of multiple children, all your children will be different. The goal is the same, but the way that you get them will vary. And so it's trying to help people kind of wrestle through and think through, well, what does it look like for my child to grow in their love of the Lord? In what areas, where do they need help? Where do they need encouragement? Where do they need support? and actually recognizing that and kind of wrestling through that, I think, has been the first sort of big thing that we found, isn't it?
Definitely, and I think partly because dads, like anybody else, are looking for the kind of 3 simple solutions. And you know, if somebody will give them 3 simple solutions, they'll take it and they'll try it. But often we'll find maybe that doesn't work with their child because they're not like the child that the 3 simple solutions the child has come from. And therefore, we've chatted with a number of different guys in different situations, and it's been a real blessing to chat to dads who are struggling with depression through being dads, and how does that affect it, and dads who are single dads, and maybe not seeing their kids all the time, how does that impact seeking to raise your children to know and love the Lord Jesus? But one of the things I think that's come out of all of that, which I hinted at before, so this is kind of lesson 2 for us, if you like. If lesson 1 was actually dadding is a variable sport, there are no simple answers. Secondly, actually, dadding lessons are best worked out together. We, in the process of talking these things through, I mentioned before that the pennies dropped, and therefore one of the most helpful things I think we can do is just get dads together to talk about some of the struggles that they face. I know one thing that we do here at church is have a family forum where we just open questions for Christian parents just to talk through certain issues. But maybe, you know, just getting some dads down the pub with a question just to talk through how do we do this when our kids are struggling to come to church, they don't want to come, what are we going to do about that? And actually for me, just chatting to Ben about some of these things over a 20-minute kind of recording has helped me work through just the verbalizing of it, and listening to Ben's wisdom and so on, as limited as it was, has been a huge kind of helpful thing as we work through these things. So dadding is a variable sport. Secondly, dadding lessons are best worked out together.
Yeah, and I think there's particularly remember the episode we did on discipline. We finished recording, and I think we both like, that went in a direction that was very different to what we thought. That's just from having a conversation. The third big thing that I think that comes across, I think that we've picked up a lot, particularly when we're a number of the interviews we've done with other people and talking about different things. One of the best thing that we can do as dads is spend time with our kids. And that's, I guess that kind of sounds obvious and a bit kind of common sense, you know, or obviously, but a lot of people, a lot of dads struggle to spend time with their children. They're out at work all day. They might be getting home late. When they get home, they're tired. Kids are already kind of on the bedtime routine if they're younger. And so actually, sometimes it can be hard, I think, for dads. Dads have got to be intentional about carving out time with their kids. I feel very blessed that I'm a pastor. I work from home. I'm around when the kids get back from school. It's easier to kind of make those opportunities. And also, it's the time that we spend with our kids. I think there is a degree to which there needs to be an intentionality there. Now, it's perfectly fine to just veg out on the sofa and watch a decent movie. But instead of using the TV as a kind of a shut-up box to get you some peace and quiet, you're going to engage with them and sit through them with the, you know, you don't have to turn it into a kind of great big chat afterwards about the kind of the meta-narrative and the themes that are coming through and how the evil secular world is poisoning your brain. You can go there at some point. But having kind of intentional time where you're doing things together, I think even involving them in the simple things. So if you've got to go out and run an errand, you know, take a child with you. The kind of the amount of time you spend with your kids kind of buys credit in the bank later on when you're having difficult conversations. I think being interested in their day. Finding out what they think about the movie or the sport game, you know, the footy game that you watched, or the book that they're reading, or those kind of things. We did an episode on bedtime stories. We still read stories to our kids as a family thing, which sounds a bit old-fashioned, I guess, but it works. It works in my family situation. I know it does with Robin. and sometimes I think we've discovered that actually time is so important that if I was to get pushback from dad saying, "Oh, but I'm just so busy with work," I just get very limited time. All I can do is da, da, da. I think I would push back and say, "Well, you've got to change your priorities if you can." Now, sometimes it's difficult if work is hard to find and those kind of things. But I think we would encourage people to structure their time so that they do have quality, intentional time with their kids, and that is something that is worth fighting for. Your responsibility biblically, isn't it? It's Christian husband, father, and then anything else. Brant Hanson's quite interesting on this. If you want to kind of go and dig out his recent book, in terms of making decisions that allow you to spend time with your kids as a dad. That'll be lesson number 3.
Yeah, I had an interesting situation the other week. We've got a young single mum who has adopted a number of kids. Oh, she's wonderful. But one of her boys came up and I gave him a cuddle. He always loves cuddles. And he felt my face. He said, "You've got hair on your face." And it made me realize, actually, just part of being a dad as your child grows up, simply being there physically educates them in terms of their growth and development. If there's no male there, they won't understand things like, hair growing on your face and, your body changing and all that kind of stuff. So simply the presence of a father is a hugely important thing. Don't get me wrong, she's doing an incredible job. But lesson 4, I think many dads are nervous and scared but desperate to do it right. And what that means is that they can often listen to the wrong advice. So a lot of kind of stuff is chucked over from the States. Some of it's helpful, some of it isn't. The world is telling us a lot of things. We'll get lots of kind of information from school on how we should parent our children, perhaps. And dads are keen to get it right because they're scared of getting it wrong. And I think the world feeds them that fear of, what if you don't get this right? What might happen? And there are, and some of that fear will mean that they want to take control of their child. And that's not always a helpful principle in terms of parenting, I don't think. I think we desperately want to have control, but actually our children are individuals and people, and they're growing up into adults, and therefore we need to enable them to grow into adults and help coax and encourage our dads to allow that, rather than shutting down hard on the things that they're afraid of. So somebody said to me the other week, I think it's quite helpful. They talked about roots and wings. We want to provide our children with roots, but we also want to enable them to grow wings. That is, we want them to be rooted enough in us as a family, in knowing our traditions and our patterns, but also able to leave and set up their own families. And I think some of the fears of the world, perhaps some of the nervousness around dating can squash that. Perhaps the roots are too strong, and the wings are not encouraged to develop enough.
Yeah, and I think that feeds into the 5th thing that we've sort of discovered. Actually, there is again, it's sort of common sense, but the way that you parent, the way that dadding works changes as your children get older. And so I think a lot of the kind of the root work happens early on, so that you can then grow the level of independence that your kids have as they get older, which is not always straightforward, I think. So my kids are 13, 11 and 10. I think I would be a brilliant dad of an 8-year-old now, but it's kind of too late, because they're all, you kind of work, you sort of work out a stage, and then they kind of grow up through it. But it's the I think it's really important to kind of be looking ahead, in a sense. So I'm fortunate in that Robin is a lot older than I am, and he's already kind of hit the teenage years with his eldest. So I'm kind of getting wisdom from him in terms of, well, how do I kind of look after my kids as they kind of get into that stage? What does it look like for so one of the transitions that we just gone through. So my eldest is now in high school, because we've got a middle school system in Droitwich. So he's had a year of high school. He's started to become a lot more independent, but it's just working out the boundaries, how that operates. So it's not. So I think it's super important to kind of be aware that as they get older, their needs will change. Their need to kind of become more independent will change, but that will be different, as you always said, for every kid. So my eldest got a mobile phone at a younger age than my middle child, simply because of level of maturity and need. And what was going to think. So that there are kind of practical outworkings sometimes because of the individual character. And there are kind of scary moments. I'm sure, I think Robin's got some pretty good stories of this, of his eldest, I think, of just having to, knowing that your kid is going to leave the house and going into a situation where it could go wrong. I mean, you can speak into that a little bit if you wanted to, Robin. I might be throwing you under the bus here. But
no, that's fine. I mean, it's more my number two, who just climbs trees. He climbs everything. I mean, they're the scary moments. And I think that's right. And I think I'm very convinced that a lot of our training stuff for young parents, whilst it's good, it's very focused on discipline. And I think to make that transition then to particularly teenagers, where actually discipline doesn't really work in quite the same way. You've got to allow them the freedom to make those mistakes and try things, and otherwise, they'll never learn. But that can be quite hard to watch as a dad when you're going, I know this isn't going to work, but they need to find that out for themselves. So I think it's not a. I think partly being a dad, as we've chatted, I've kind of worked out that there aren't simple solutions. There's no kind of 3 steps to being an amazing Christian dad. It's complex, and we work it out. And we work it out by talking and sharing wisdom together. Wisdom is not you read the book of Proverbs, and there's 2 Proverbs, I wish I could quote them at you, that are almost opposites, side by side. Because the nature of walking in God's world is that it's complex, because we're complex. And that's a wonderful thing. But it means that we need to walk together to help each other work these things out. And I think one of the bottom lines is that humor matters. So dad jokes are very important. If you've not learned any dad jokes, let's just kind of give you some ammunition. It's just embarrass your kids if nothing else. I mean, for example, some idiots just glued my pack of cards together, and I'm really struggling to deal with it. Ben, have you got any better than that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a long-term problem with speed bumps, but I'm slowly learning to get over them.
Nice. Go on. I called animal welfare today, and I've just found a suitcase in the woods. I told them, and it's got 4 kittens in it. The lady on the phone said, "That's terrible." She said, "Are they moving?" And I said, "Well, to be honest, I don't know, but that might explain the suitcase."
Oh wow, that's awful.
Thanks.
I mean, linked to that, I was renewing my car insurance and going through the list of questions. The lady on the end of the phone said, "Have you got any pets?" I said, "Yeah, I've got a dog." "Well, do you want insurance for him as well?" I said, "Well, he can't drive." Yeah, there we go.
Time's up. Quick, stop us. Before it goes absolutely haywire, because I've just invented a thought-controlled air freshener, which makes sense when you think about it. Makes sense.
Yes.
Tom.
Oh, guys, how do you follow that?
Oh, isn't it?
That is very helpful until the end. That was great. And I think segues us lovely in a great way into kind of questions.
And I just add a comment more than a question. Just thanks for that. I thought it was really interesting. I like the bit towards the end, the roots and wings was particularly I thought interesting. I think so. For context, I've got a son. He's only 18 months, so this is probably a bit down the pipeline, but we are having already starting to have conversations about schooling and thinking about like friendship groups and how he might develop in that way, particularly in the world as it is these days, and just trying to protect him in some ways, but then also allowing him some degree of freedom. So I thought that was really interesting, and I had seen some stuff around. It effectively comes down to your relationship with your child, and if you're able to build that strong relationship, then you should be able to support them as a Christian parent and guide them in that way. And I think that speaks to pretty much all of the lessons that you thought. But also, did you have anything in that vein around relationships and how else to kind of build on them and kind of get on their level? I know, speaking to other dads with young children who are a bit older, a bit more in their kind of teens, they're saying they're struggling to engage with their children and get them along to church, enjoying church, sitting through a service, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you, Ali. Yeah, how do you maintain that relationship with your child, particularly through, I mean, I think in some ways it's these years are the foundational ones, aren't they, for you, in terms of setting that relationship in place. I think, I mean, in my experience, these things peak and trough, partly dependent on our children. So there'll be weeks where they're just a bit grumpy and they don't want to talk to us about stuff. And there'll be other weeks where they're a bit more open and cheery. I think sometimes it's enabling those opportunities to arise. And so looking for, whether it's going for a walk in the countryside can be a great opportunity where there's no agenda. It's just, it's you two together or the family or whatever. Getting a dog has been a huge help for that.
Yeah.
It just meant, let's go for a walk. We've got to take the dog for a walk. So let's all go and we get chatting and we laugh and we get muddy and and certain questions come up. So my youngest was in tears about why God still allows her to sin the other morning, and it was just one of those opportunities that you just have to try and take, and these times will come when you're not expecting them, and often when you don't feel like you've got the time. It's just as you're trying to get out the door that they ask that question. But trying to create that time or trying to come back to it later, or however you manage to do it, in terms of, actually, I think in part it's saying those moments when they ask those questions, saying to the child, that's really valuable. I love it when you ask those questions. I love it when we talk about these things. And that's where the being present and the giving them the time is really valuable. From a really, really young age. I remember taking my number two, the one who climbs everything, for a hill walk when he was about 3, and he just spent the whole time just firing questions at me, which is partly his character, but partly it's those opportunities. And whether, maybe it's a long car journey or a train ride or or a walk, finding those opportunities to be together but not doing much. I think. Ben, would you add?
Yeah, and I think I'd say I'd echo the peaks and troughs thing. So I think so your kids will kind of then will be comfortable asking questions and being open if the relationship is there, if there is a kind of a bank of time spent together already doing boring things. So I don't think we can sit there as dads and be like, right, okay, this week I'm going to do intentional walk with child number 3 Wednesday at 6 p.m. and go for a walk with child number 3 at Wednesday 6 p.m. and then and start firing questions about their spiritual walk, and then being surprised that nothing happens. I think in a sense it's recognizing that no, actually what I need, if I've spent time with my kids throughout the week, whether it's just trying to protect kind of eating meals together, if you can do that, or like if you my wife often, if she's doing the weekly shop, she'll take one of the kids, no reason, no game plan, just because it's, you know, well, she's busy doing that. Come and do the boring bits of life with us, because this is part of being part of the family. I think we can kind of get caught up in our age of kind of thinking that when we do stuff with our kids, it's got to be kind of an event and entertaining and cost money and be some kind of special thing. But that actually, it's just time. And then what will happen is that you'll suddenly get these moments where, for whatever reason, the questions come from your kids. And then it's kind of, because you've got that kind of that body built up. I think it's what linked to the kind of the stuff about transitioning in age sections. One of the things I'm thinking through, I'm not quite sure whether it's right or not. My eldest is now 13. I was chatting with Robin about this the other day, and it feels like now my relationship with him is closer to being a friendship than a kind of mentor-mentee kind of thing. Like we've become, you know, we've got shared interests. We're both cricket mad. And so more and more he's starting to have conversations where almost kind of on a level. Now, I'm not quite sure what I think about that yet. In terms of, I think I'm meant to be more than just his mate. But it's definitely a kind of a shift in terms of how much agency he has in the relationship. A little bit, but I'm not quite sure how that. Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
It's almost recognizing that they're people, not projects.
Yeah,
and I think particularly as men, we love our projects, but you know they're people, and therefore the questions, the conversations will arise when they decide, not when we've engineered it. But we have to invest in that so that they feel that they can.
That's a much more succinct way of putting what I rabbited on for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Ali, do you want to come back in on that? Or?
No, I think that's good. I think I can agree with all of that, and I do think that then you get, as you were saying, Ben, you get to that point where you start talking more of like a less of a mentor-mentee level, and then but also maintaining that sort of authoritative figure, and so that then I can see another challenge coming into play further down the line of, oh, I'm still your dad, and I still at this point know what's best for you, and yeah, so I can see I can see how it, as you've already said, it changes from early years to later years, and how it changes over time. It's just an evolving story. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Robin, you mentioned getting dads together, the value of that, and kind of doing a family forum at church. I was just wanting to pick up on that and just kind of trying to tease that out a bit. How do you do that? How do you do that family forum? Is that a kind of scheduled church event? And have you got any other, is that how you try and get dads together? You say, okay, we're going to put a date in where we're going to the pub, and this is, you know, it's going to be formal like that, but you are kind of less formal as well. Give us some ideas on getting dads together.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as with all of these things, it's got to fit your context. So it's got to be something that works well in the kind of area you are. So we do a family forum once a term, and it's at our youth group time. So the youth come and the parents come. And we've done a number of different topics. I did one on pornography last term. My kids who were present in the room were curling up with embarrassment, which was partly quite enjoyable for me. We're doing mental health this Sunday, just talking about that. And kind of out of that, and sometimes just organically come the kind of, you know, a little group of dads we've got a bunch of dads who are quite new Christians at the moment, and they've just set up a WhatsApp group, and are trying to, you know, go out for, I think they're trying to arrange, you know, various kind of just times going out go-karting or going to the pub or whatever. So sometimes it comes organically. We've done dads and lads weekends away in the past. We did a dads and kids camping weekend over lockdown. It's one of the few things we can do, which was just brilliant, just for dads to sit around the fire, you know, late of an evening when the kids have kind of gone to sleep, and just chat about stuff. So we kind of do different things. It's kind of working out what works where you are. I'm afraid my phone answer phone is going. That's what you can hear in the background. There's nothing I can do about it.
I was wondering if that was a question coming.
It was a very quiet question.
Yeah, someone's phoned you instead. Great, good. Okay, pick up on something else you said. Stories, reading stories to your kids. Also, I guess the stories that you want them to read. I really enjoy some of the book reviews on your Everyday Dadding website. They seem to have dried up, so keep going with those.
Yeah, we are. We've got a plan.
Yeah, good. That's great. But I mean, it just seems like we've loved the wing feather books in our family. It just seems like it just struck me that they teach things like self-sacrifice and kind of love for others in a far more powerful way than me just saying to my kids, look after your brother. Have you got any more recommendations in terms of literature, getting them into stories?
We're just working through the Presadian novels by a guy called Luke Aylen, A-Y-L-E-N at the moment, which are kind of along a wing feather style, Narnia style thing. So there are 3 of those, which are pretty good. So we've used those. I try and find classic literature. So I think we mentioned in the podcast, I've read a number of times the Little House on the Prairie, although I have to stop and kind of explain the slightly racist elements in them. But there's some other fascinating glimpses into another world there. We just finished War of the Worlds, so and we'll read Christian and non-Christian with them. I mean, if you're looking for something like Wing Feather, there's nothing like. Nothing quite as outstanding as that, but there are other series. Green Ember by S.D. Smith, it's quite interesting. A number of kind of other American authors. We need some British authors if anybody fancies taking up the mantle. Luke Aylen does a grand job of that, I think. Ben, any from you?
Yeah, I mean, funny. So for whatever reason, my kids didn't particularly get on with Wing Feather.
Interesting.
They enjoyed The Hobbit, and we've done the first Lord of the Rings, but didn't like Wing Feather. There we go. Every kid's different. What else have we enjoyed? Wind in the Willows is quite fun because it's ludicrous. It's so pompous and really good fun when you realise that the author wrote it basically as a polemic against his eldest child. So Toad is his eldest child.
Ouch.
which is brilliant.
I didn't realize.
I think we tend to. I think we've talked about this in the pod. I think it's good to read stories that will engage the imagination. So fantasy does kind of work well, particularly anything that involves building a different world. So there are some books about wizards and which that are reasonably popular. But the sort of Narnia stuff or Lord of the Rings, the Wing Feather, if your kids get on with it, anything that constructs a different world that encourages imagination, I think is really healthy, because the gospel, right, requires imagination, requires a belief in the unreal in some sense, doesn't it? We're talking miracles. There's a guy walking on water coming back from the dead. I think we've got to be careful that the great thing about story and world building and engaging with those kind of things is that it encourages a belief in the immaterial. If we kind of buy into the kind of all you can kind of enjoy and sense is the material world, then suddenly the gospel is never going to be true. And so I think from that, so they don't necessarily have to be stories that are deliberately set out to be allegories or kind of the gospel hidden in a kind of a tale, but I think anything that encourages them to use their imagination and enjoy being invested in a world that's different to theirs. The Boy in the Back of the Room, we read that, so that was great.
Yeah, that's great.
But yeah, refugee child turning up in the back of the classroom.
1,000-year-old boy. I don't know if the 1,000-year-old boy is excellent as well. These are all non-Christian ones, but about a boy who's kind of never died. He's taken a little tablet and he's lived for 1,000 years, and just kind of what that means about friendship, about the world. And I think the imagination is a critical thing. As Ben says, our world is secular. It says, look, there's nothing else. What you see is what you get, and therefore enabling our children to break out of that. With fantasy stories is really important. It's like a muscle that you need to help build up, I think. I think the imagination, and it comes back to questions as well. I think the imagination works like worldview glue. And so when a child asks questions, they're imagining and they're trying to glue together the bits of the world that they understand to make a coherent whole. So as you read these stories with your children and they ask these questions, what it's enabling them to do is to fit things together in their heads into more than just kind of propositions, more than just kind of facts, but a bigger connected whole. So I think I think reading fantasy stories to our kids is vital.
And you can get story from watching Marvel, but you don't get the same stretch with imagination because it's visual. I think there is something unique about the written word, isn't there? Anyway, I'll shut up, but just to throw that in.
I had one other quick question, recognizing we're kind of pushing for time. How do you suggest, there might not be an answer for this, but like for your local church, do you because we might be moving and we're deciding the kind of the churches to possibly go to, does the sort of youth ministry of that church, or there being other children of similar age, play a big factor in your choice? Or do you think it's more important that the family are the kind of parents are being well fed, and then that way they can support the children through other ways, if the youth, for example, if the church doesn't have a youth ministry really?
Ben, do you want to go, or do you want me to?
Should I say a couple of quick things, then you can kind of rattle on and everyone else can go and enjoy the rest of the day? If the preaching of God's word isn't central in the church, it's a waste of time going there. It doesn't matter how big the youth ministry is. And I think I would personally look for a church where God's word is central and the whole family are included in the church. And by that, I mean, some kind of expectation that there will be kids around, and that there is a whole church kind of mentality, or a desire for there to be a whole church mentality to be involved in seeing these kids grow up to know and love the Lord Jesus. And if you have that, which is not an easy thing to find, not an easy thing to do, but if you have elements of that, then it means that the number of other children there is less important for your kids wanting to turn up. So my kids come to church and then go and hang out with Nick and Dot, who are in their 80s. Because they've taken time to invest in. So if there aren't children, having no other children at the church shouldn't be a barrier if the church is doing what the church should be doing. Now, it's clearly helpful, and one of the I think having good Christian mates as kids and teenagers is a really helpful thing in keeping going, but it's not. Anyway, Robin, you add your topic.
So the way I try and explain it is like two umbrellas which protect the child, and the first umbrella is the family, and the second umbrella is the church. It's working out how these two function together, because we all need spiritual aunts and uncles. We all need spiritual grandparents, those who have walked ahead of us on the road. And I think and children need that as well. So they need to see, they need to rub alongside older Christians to learn how they grow in faith. So one bit of research called Sticky Faith, it talks about reversing the ratio of adults to children. That is that there should be 5 Christian adults to every child. That is 5 Christian adult relationships that child has. That's significant in their life. So 5 spiritual aunts, uncles, grandparents for that faith to stick with them. And yet at the same time, it is, of course, it's really helpful for them to have a Christian friend their own age and be talking about school and, you know, praying together or whatever that might be. Yeah.
That's really good. That's useful. Thank you.
So
we have pretty much got to the end of our time. Thank you so much again, guys. Maybe I could ask you just as a final thing, books specifically for Christian dads, any like top recommendations there?
ooh.
The Bible, I'm going to say that. There we go.
Thanks for that.
I think those Elijah Huey ones, very simple. You know, it depends how much of a reader you are, but there's a series mostly by Elijah Huey. There's some other ones that 10 of those have done: Raising Children in a Sex-Saturated World, Raising Children in the Way of Grace. Just really short, simple, pithy books. Some of those I really rate. Ted Turnow's little book on kind of the pop culture parent, I think it is really helpful to that. I
enjoyed Family Discipleship by Matt Chandler and the guy that we interviewed. I can't remember his name.
Adam Griffin.
That's right. I think it's slightly American, and the cover is the worst cover of a Christian book you've ever seen in your life. But the principle of the principles that they kind of talk about, I think, are really helpful in terms of looking for sort of markers and moments and milestones and making the most of kind of those opportunities. I think it's quite a helpful principle thing. But you can get all that from the podcast episode, so you don't have to buy the book.
Yeah, I think all my other recommendations would be very much qualified recommendations, so I can't really make them. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank you again. And there are plenty of obviously questions we've not got into or we could talk more about. So if you've been inspired by being here or by watching this on YouTube, why not get some dads together at your church and talk and let's do dadding together. And that's great. That's been a real inspiration towards that. So thank you again, Robin and Ben.